Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. The white corridor of the hospital wing absorbed her hurried steps. Sarah had to urgently finish a pile of papers. Today promised to be intense. Two complex surgeries, and one of them concerned a girl whose fate was intertwined with people who had left a deep, painful mark on her past. She wished she could erase those years filled with pain, injustice, fear, and resentment from her memory. It seemed that chapter of her life was closed forever, and Sarah's new reality held no single reminder of her youth. However, just recently, the past had knocked on her door again. But this time, the meeting was different. The same faces from the past sat in the office. It was as if an icy wave had washed over Sarah. She recognized them instantly, despite the many years that had passed since the very young girl with a light backpack on her shoulders had left her parental home. Both of them had changed, but Sarah couldn't help but recognize them. The conversation was long, burdened by the unspoken. They weren't looking for reasons to reproach, though there were plenty. A great misfortune had befallen them. And how could one not believe in fate's boomerangs? This invisible boomerang, had also struck someone completely innocent, a little person. It was she who needed help. Sarah, an experienced doctor, had encountered such cases. She knew how to act. The night after that meeting brought Sarah a long period of insomnia. Her children had long been in a deep sleep in their rooms. Her beloved husband breathed peacefully beside her. Sarah tossed and turned, trying to shake off the memories, but images of the past appeared before her eyes on their own, like revived frames of an old film. Sarah didn't remember her mother. She knew she once had a mother, but the girl was only 4 years old when her dearest person was gone. Sarah learned about her parent from her father, who, incidentally, didn't like to stir up the past, partly because it caused him pain. As she grew older, Sarah noticed a shadow of sadness in his eyes whenever her mother was mentioned. And then Carol appeared, a woman who entered their home when Sarah was 7 and immediately took the place of the rightful mistress. Her stepmother couldn't stand any mention of her predecessor, and her father preferred to remain silent so as not to upset his current wife. Sarah had another kindred spirit, her mother's cousin, Aunt Mary. She lived far away, in another city. Since childhood, Sarah spent a week or two with her every year during the holidays. And before Mary moved away, niece and aunt saw each other much more often. That was a time of pure happiness. Aunt Mary took the girl to theaters and museums. They walked, laughed, shared secrets. Mary's son, David, already a high schooler then, helped his younger cousin with math homework and carried her around the city on his strong shoulders and sometimes took her with him on walks. All his friends, especially the girls, treated Sarah with warmth. It was wonderful. But Carol couldn't stand Aunt Mary. Even little Sarah felt it. Her stepmother spoke of her with obvious disdain, her voice tinged with antipathy. Aunt Mary was not welcome in Sarah's home, and this upset and surprised the girl. How could anyone not love Aunt Mary? She was so kind, bright, and cheerful. Aunt Mary often told Sarah about her mother, mostly funny stories from their shared childhood and youth. The cousins were inseparable. They went through a lot together, both good and bad, both joyful and dangerous. Aunt Mary sincerely admired Eleanor, and Sarah simply adored listening to these stories and looking at photographs that preserved the memory of the dearest person she didn't remember at all. "Your mother was so happy when you were born." Aunt Mary smiled, looking at Sarah. "She was simply flying on wings. We made plans together on how we would raise you, develop you, educate you. You had such delicate, as if skilled fingers. Your mother dreamed you would become a surgeon, saving people. She had a weak heart since childhood, a complex defect, and no one could cure her. So she wanted her daughter to help people like her, to make them healthy and happy. Incidentally, it didn't escape Sarah's notice that Aunt Mary herself felt quite coolly towards Carol. And towards her father, too. No, Aunt Mary didn't say anything directly, but the girls saw it in the change in Mary's voice, in the expression in her eyes. Sarah was tormented by doubts then. Why did the adults who meant so much to her dislike each other, barely restraining themselves when they met to avoid saying hurtful things? Carol constantly found reasons for dissatisfaction. Sometimes Aunt Mary brought Sarah home late. Sometimes she didn't dress her properly for a walk. Sometimes not all the holiday homework was done. The nitpicking was incessant. Imperceptibly, Sarah's contact with Aunt Mary became less frequent, and then some conflict occurred between the adults, and the connection with Mary was severed completely. Aunt Mary called only once after that quarrel. Carol graciously allowed them to talk. "Sweetheart, don't think I'm abandoning you," Aunt Mary said. "It's just how things turned out. You're too young to understand yet. You know my address. If anything happens, be sure to come. I'll help you in a difficult moment. Remember that. You can always count on me." And that was it. That was their last conversation. After that, it was like a clean break. Carol said that Aunt Mary had her own things going on, that her son was applying to university, problems with work. She didn't have time for her niece. But Sarah understood everything. She heard Aunt Mary call the home phone, but Carol would answer and respond rudely, without calling Sarah. One day Sarah saw Aunt Mary from the car window. She was standing in their yard. She waved to her, but Carol distracted her, and the car sped away, leaving Aunt Mary behind. Apparently, she was trying to meet with her niece, and it wasn't easy, as she lived in another city, had to leave her affairs, come visit. But her father and stepmother shielded Sarah from communicating with Aunt Mary in every way. They were united in their dislike for her. Sarah had a hard time at first without communicating with her beloved Aunt Mary, the only one who supported and understood her. At home, a completely different atmosphere reigned. Her father and stepmother had a daughter, Emily. At first, Sarah was happy. A charming little one, a baby sister, a tiny doll. But the joy didn't last long. Firstly, Sarah saw the tenderness and love parents could shower on a child. Her father worked a lot. He couldn't give his daughter as much attention as she wanted. Sometimes he'd ask about school, or how she was feeling, but it was clear her answers didn't really interest him. And when Sarah asked him to play with her, to give her a piggyback ride like David, Aunt Mary's son, to walk in the park, even to kick a ball, he would brush her off. His gaze was distant, as if, while talking to his daughter, he was somewhere far away. Carol, on the other hand, was openly irritated by Sarah's presence. The girl tried to behave impeccably to earn her favor. She did her homework, cleaned up after herself, played quietly and unnoticed. But Carol always found a reason to scold her stepdaughter. This wasn't right. That wasn't right. And again, Carol's look, full of annoyance, as if at a bothersome obstacle. It was impossible not to notice. And the girl had reached out to her so much at first. She wanted what other girls had: joint shopping trips, heart-to-heart talks, cooking. But Carol avoided such communication in every way. However, she performed her parental duties formally. No one from the outside could have accused Carol of poor care for the girl. And then Emily was born, and Sarah saw her father and Carol from a completely different perspective, understanding that they could be like that. Loving, caring, attentive. Just not with her, but with Emily. The baby's smile, her cooing, her first achievements, everything delighted her parents. They could spend hours admiring their daughter playing in her playpen, or simply sleeping, standing over her crib, happy, exchanging glances. Even with their last money, they threw lavish birthday parties for Emily, bought everything best. Sarah, meanwhile, got things on a residual basis. The slightest successes of the younger sister were elevated to the rank of genius, while Sarah, no matter how hard she tried, couldn't earn even modest praise. She studied excellently, was a straight A student, but this was taken for granted. It was precisely this contrast that hurt. No, Sarah didn't envy her sister's dolls or outfits. After all, she was also dressed. The matter was different. Emily's parents always listened to her with genuine interest. They enjoyed spending time with her. They were happy with her answers. And Sarah felt like an outsider in this family, completely alien. Her father sometimes tried to talk to his older daughter, as if heart to heart. It was clear he was making an effort, and in reality, he wasn't particularly interested in listening about her life. Carol, on the other hand, was openly irritated by her stepdaughter's presence, and over the years, she almost stopped hiding it. Later, Sarah guessed that it was Carol who turned her father against her, told him only bad things, portrayed her stepdaughter in a bad light. She did this with filigree skill, artfully. Her husband had no idea of her true intentions, especially since he was almost never home. He worked a lot. He even thanked his new wife for helping him, raising his child, bringing her up, cherishing her. Her father went away for work shifts. Sarah lived for months only with Carol and Emily, feeling like a stranger in her own apartment. Gradually, Sarah acquired a multitude of responsibilities. She had to clean the rooms before Carol came home from work, go to the store, cook dinner, take Emily to clubs and sections. 90% of the time, Emily was too young to get to her activities on her own, so Sarah accompanied her, who already had enough household chores, not to mention her studies. In high school, they assigned a lot. Sarah was used to doing everything conscientiously, so she stayed up late, with almost no time left for rest. Sarah tried to talk to Carol, to explain how difficult it was for her to live under such a regime. Of course, it didn't yield results. "You're just lazy," Carol sighed. "Like most modern teenagers. But we, your parents, are responsible for your upbringing and are doing everything for your own good." It was utterly useless to approach her father. He had been subtly influenced by Carol and felt grateful to her for raising his daughter so well, in a love for work, in reasonable strictness. Her father sincerely believed that he owed it to Carol that Sarah wasn't hanging around in yards with other teenagers, drinking beer on benches, or smoking. "You'll appreciate this later," he explained to his older daughter when she tried to talk about her dreams. "Because of your age, you just don't understand what Carol is doing for you. She's preparing you for adult life." For adult life? Sarah wanted to cry from resentment then. She wasn't a little girl anymore and knew what she wanted to become: a surgeon, preferably a cardiac surgeon, to treat those whom others had given up on. But getting into medical academy wasn't easy. It would be good to also attend courses at the university. Sarah talked to her parents, trying to convey how important these courses were to her. "But you know, we're not doing great with money right now." Carol shook her head. "And these courses of yours are expensive. We can't afford them. And anyway, maybe you won't need this. Today you want to be a doctor, tomorrow a ballerina, right now this, and we have to pay for these whims when we already don't have enough money." And that was the pure truth. Her father started having problems at work. His salary significantly decreased. It was delayed. The family lived on previous savings. But money for Emily's lessons was always found, and birthdays were celebrated, and dresses were bought, and sweets. Her parents economized on everything except their adored younger daughter. And it was already difficult to forbid Emily anything. At the slightest thing, there were tears, tantrums, scandals, disgusting scenes with snot smearing and stomping tiny feet. At such moments, her father called Emily his princess and hugged her close. Carol was also touched, and all the little princess's wishes were immediately fulfilled. Her parents couldn't stand to see her tears. They couldn't deny her anything. This wasn't Sarah. When the older one tried to explain to her stepmother, her father, how she saw the situation, she ended up being blamed too. "You don't understand that she's a child," her father said sternly. "A little child who doesn't understand financial problems. The little one should have a happy childhood." "This is all your spoiled nature plus innate selfishness," Carol said, pursing her lips and looking at Sarah. "You're an adult, and you don't understand anything. This is also your jealousy, pathological. No, we missed something somewhere in your upbringing." Every time Sarah tried to talk about something with her stepmother or father, she ended up being blamed, felt misunderstood, and rejected. Of course, no one paid for the medical academy preparation courses. The girl's wish was considered a whim, and she was advised to study better. How much better could it be? She already had straight A's, despite the excessive household burden. By the way, Carol also considered her academic success her achievement. After all, it was she who had instilled in Sarah a love for work. It was her final year of school. Just a little more, and Sarah would finish school. She still hoped to get into medical academy. The courses weren't paid for, so she prepared herself. Fortunately, there was a lot of free literature online. Money in the family was still tight, but things seemed to be getting better. Her father found a new job, true, again involving long business trips. He had gone away for work shifts before, but now he would be gone for 3 or 4 months. But the salary promised to be more than decent. Carol was happy about this. Emily started school. Now Sarah had another duty, doing homework with her sister. It wasn't easy. Firstly, Emily had grown up very capricious. At the slightest thing, she'd burst into tears. The slightest difficulties caused hysterics. She would cry, complain to her mother, who would pity her and ask Sarah to be gentler with the little one. How could she be any softer? Secondly, Emily, well, how to put it? Academics were difficult for her, and she was restless. In short, Sarah worked up a sweat before her sister's homework was finished. And only then did the girl start on her own assignments and again stayed up late, almost falling asleep at school in the morning. From Carol, Sarah still saw only reproaches and complaints. Despite the fact that the girl did so much for her stepmother, helped around the house, raised Emily, she saw no gratitude from Carol. She continued to perceive her stepdaughter as an obstacle without whom everyone would be better off. And now Sarah had also grown up, become smarter, started to understand a lot. This drove Carol completely mad. Her stepmother didn't even hide that she dreamed of the day Sarah would set off on her own, would fly out of the nest. She told her husband that life would improve after their older daughter grew up and would be completely different. That is, even her father perceived Sarah as some kind of annoying hindrance. Sometimes the girl shared her worries with her classmate Chloe. She was quiet and smart, even wise despite her young age. Young herself, but with a soul as if old, having seen much. "Your stepmother is a typical stepmother," Chloe shook her head, listening to Sarah. "But never mind. Life is like that. It will put everything in its place. You'll see. You'll remember my words. And you yourself will endure, and everything will be wonderful for you with such a core." Her classmates' words were encouraging, instilled hope for a bright future, gave her strength to live. Sarah didn't back down from her dream. She wanted to be a surgeon and did a lot for it. And she knew, after school she would take her documents to the medical academy. The academy was located in their city just 3 stops from home. She could walk. A tall old building in the center. The girl often walked past it among the young men and women hurrying to this temple of science. This was her dream. And then Sarah held her diploma, red, of a special type, and even a gold medal. Sarah was happy and proud of herself. She didn't go to the graduation party. Carol said there was no money. And Sarah herself wasn't very eager for the restaurant. She wasn't particularly upset. "Well then," Carol said that evening on the day of the diploma ceremony. Her father, as usual, was on a business trip. "Now you are an adult, almost 18. We've raised you all these years, given you everything, clothes, food, a roof over your head. The time has come for you to fly out of the parental nest." "Where?" Sarah didn't understand. "Where do you mean? To work, of course. What studying? Sarah, leave these silly fantasies. Stop dreaming of the impossible. Medical academy? Do you know what the competition is like there? I checked, 12 people per place. You won't get in. Don't even dream of it." Well, I prepared and I feel capable. That's your overconfidence talking. You'll never get into such a university. Something simpler is certainly within your abilities. But think about it. That's another 5 years of studying, and you need to work. I need to study. Sarah glanced at her medal. I'm quite good at it. School is one thing. Carol started to get angry, but for now she tried to hide it. But this is university. In school they gave you grades for effort. In university you'll have to study for real. There won't be time for anything. And you're already an adult. You should support yourself. Especially since we're not exactly flush with money right now, supporting an adult girl for several more years is an excessive burden. I'll talk to your father. In fact, I already have, and he fully agrees. Sarah, it's not worth spending years studying. It's nonsense in our situation. Then people with those same diplomas stand behind cash registers just like those who didn't finish university. I know that for a fact. Carol, as it happened, worked as a cashier. She had an unfinished law college education behind her, and she often spoke with a kind of malicious glee about her cashier colleagues with degrees in economics and law. You just don't know life yet, she lectured her stepdaughter. No universities, no courses, no buts. I've already arranged it. I have a friend, a chief accountant at a homeowner association. They need a janitor. It's not bad for a start. The most important thing is they provide employees with housing for next to nothing from a reserve fund. That means you can move out tomorrow and start your own life. And then Sarah flared up with anger. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to speak to her stepmother like that. You have no right to dictate my fate. I will be a surgeon, definitely. This is my dream, and you are no authority over me. You've humiliated me my whole life. Do you think I don't see or understand anything? Sarah was seriously worked up. She had never spoken to her parents like this. She hadn't dared. And here all the accumulated resentments burst out. The girl shouted about her feelings, about the injustice, and, strange as it may seem, she felt lighter. She understood that after this everything would change. Oh, you ungrateful wretch! Carol looked at her stepdaughter with unconcealed hatred. Get out of here, if you're so smart and independent! This is my home, too, Sarah calmly reminded her. Mine and father's. You have no right to kick me out, but I'll leave myself, with pleasure. She began packing her things. She took little: money, documents, clothes for the first while. It made a small, light backpack, just right. Sarah knew where to go, though she couldn't guess what awaited her there. After all, she hadn't spoken to Aunt Mary for so many years. But something told her. She would be welcome at Mary's house. They would greet her just like in childhood. They would support her, help her, comfort her, give her strength to realize her dream. It was long past time to go there instead of enduring the abuse. She left the apartment without looking back. Carol didn't even turn around. Sarah had no doubt. Of course, she would tell her father and portray her as always. Rude, ungrateful, almost a criminal. Her father would believe her. He believed his wife's every word. It was easier, more convenient for him that way. Well, it was time to admit that even her own father didn't understand or accept his daughter. He had made his choice. Nothing more connected Sarah with this family. Well, except for the shared inheritance, of course, but it was too early to think about that. The train station. She bought a ticket to Aunt Mary's city easily, without problems. The intercity bus was leaving in half an hour. Sarah considered this stroke of luck a good sign and smiled. Although she was trembling from the emotions and anxiety she had experienced, the girl was almost certain. Her story would end well, and now, right now, she was taking an important and right step. Aunt Mary was surprised to see her niece on her doorstep, but recognized her immediately, although they hadn't seen each other since Sarah was about 10 years old. They hugged. Finding herself in the embrace of a loved one, the girl finally gave way to her feelings. She burst into tears. Then they drank tea in the kitchen, talking. Sarah talked about her life. Aunt Mary listened, shaking her head, sighing. Well, listen, she said when Sarah had finished. You'll stay and live with me. There's a medical academy in our city, too. If you don't get in now, you'll prepare for a year, then you'll definitely get in the next year. I'd really like to, but Father, what if he doesn't allow it? You'll be 18 in a week. You can choose where to live yourself, Aunt Mary reminded her. I won't let you go back there anymore. I didn't realize you had such a hard life there. If I had known, I would have taken you through the court long ago. Aunt Mary told her how Carol had forbidden her from seeing Sarah and had also turned her father against her. But that wasn't difficult. He's been under her thumb for a long time. She convinced him that I was a bad influence on you, that I spoke badly about them. And I called you often and even came to visit, but they wouldn't let me in, wouldn't let me see you, and they returned the gifts I bought. I followed your life on social media. Sometimes Carol would post photos where you appeared, sometimes your father. But I never found your page. I thought we could at least chat through messengers. But no, they didn't allow me. They didn't allow me to create accounts when you were a teenager, they said. It takes up too much time. And children have no business on the internet. There are many scammers there. And later, when you got older, you didn't really want to yourself. Perhaps your parents were precisely afraid that I would communicate with you, Aunt Mary said thoughtfully. Hence the prohibitions. And why? Why were they always so bad to you? Well, there's a reason, Aunt Mary smiled mysteriously. You're an adult now, I'll tell you this story, and you'll understand everything. Eleanor and Mary were cousins, more than sisters, best friends. They constantly stayed over at each other's places, went to school together, hung out. Later, as they got older, they went dancing. Eleanor and Mary had no secrets from each other. They shared their deepest confidences. Eleanor had a weak heart since childhood. She was often in the hospital. Mary ran to her immediately after school, to her best friend. The doctors knew her and always let her in, even outside visiting hours. Adults, observing their friendship, joked, "You'll fall in love with the same guy, and that'll be the end of your friendship." The girls declared in unison that would never happen, and it didn't. Mary was the first to get married, to a guy from university. Tall, well-built, smart, kind. Eleanor approved her sister's choice. You will be happy. They were indeed happy, but not for long. Mary very soon became a young widow. Her husband drowned while saving two teenagers at the city beach. He pushed the boys out, but he himself. Mary was a very young mother then. Her son David had just turned 2. Of course, Eleanor was there for the inconsolable Mary at that difficult moment. She even stayed at her sister's apartment for a while, looked after her, after little David, tried to rouse her, distract her. Time passed. Mary slowly but surely began to recover. Life seemed to settle down, stabilize. Of course, she grieved for her husband, but she finally thought of herself too. Eleanor was happy for her sister after all. For a long time she had been seriously worried about her condition. Then Eleanor also married Robert, a man a little older than her, serious, substantial. He earned well, though he had to work hard, which earned Mary's respect. Eleanor's chosen one didn't exactly displease her, but Mary didn't understand what could have attracted her sister to him. They seemed to be molded from different clay. Robert wasn't very talkative, even stern, didn't understand their jokes, and Mary considered this a serious drawback. You see, next to him I feel, Eleanor tried to explain, like behind a stone wall. And Mary understood. Eleanor, her beloved sister, had lost her parents early. Perhaps she needed a reliable shoulder, and Robert was exactly that kind of person. Immediately after the wedding, Robert bought a large apartment in a prestigious area. It turned out he had savings, plus the company helped a valuable employee. Eleanor eagerly began furnishing the new home. They went shopping, choosing curtains, chandeliers, and other important interior details. It was exciting and pleasant. Soon, a child appeared in the young family. A girl, Sarah. Mary's son David was already quite grown up, almost a teenager. Incidentally, Sarah might not have been born. Doctors advised Eleanor not to give birth. Her heart was weak. It was unknown how her body would behave. But Eleanor believed that a family without a child wasn't a family. And her husband, Robert, dreamed of heirs. They decided. The pregnancy went perfectly, despite the doctor's fears. The girl was born healthy and strong. It seemed everything had turned out for the best, but not quite. A year after giving birth, Eleanor's condition began to worsen. The strain on her unhealthy body took its toll. But Eleanor regretted nothing. She followed the doctor's recommendations, underwent examinations, took pills. She looked after her health and tried not to get nervous. The doctors say the main thing is positive emotions and no stress. Well, you have positive emotions galore, Mary smiled, looking at her sweet niece. That's for sure, and no stress, everything is good in our family. Mary hoped that over time she would get to know Robert better, become friends. After all, he wasn't a stranger, her beloved sister's husband. But he remained distant and silent. Coming home and finding Mary visiting, he would greet her dryly and go into the bedroom. Does he not like me? Mary asked Eleanor. No. What are you talking about? He's just that kind of person, and he has a lot of work lately. He gets tired. He's rarely home, constant delays, business trips. What can you do? A managerial position. But my daughter and I lack nothing, and otherwise he's good, kind. He takes care of us. He doesn't deny us anything. But Mary knew her sister perfectly, and saw Eleanor was being a little cunning. It seemed she herself was upset. Something was wrong. Another year and a half passed. Sarah had grown up, started going to kindergarten, and Eleanor was constantly in hospitals. She was home less often. She had to visit doctors more often than average people and carefully monitor her health. Robert provided for the family, but spent very little time with his daughter and wife, constantly on business trips, stayed late at the office. And at home he behaved distantly, which Eleanor explained as her husband's fatigue in her sister's eyes, and perhaps in her own. But Mary saw, she understood. Something wasn't right. She felt hurt for her sister. And one day Mary saw her suspicions confirmed firsthand. Yes, Robert was indeed cheating on her. That day she got a call from school. They said David had a fever and had been sent home. The worried mother asked her boss for time off. You never know, maybe her son needed help. It wasn't clear what state he was in. That's why she was running through the train station at that moment. It was a shortcut home. And she saw them, Robert and his companion. Beautiful, slender, tall, with a fashionable, model-like appearance, as they used to say. They were coming out of the waiting room. He was carrying both suitcases, his and hers. And Robert was completely different from how Mary was used to seeing him. Inspired, his eyes shining, his mouth never closed, a smile never leaving his face. He looked at his companion with a kind of adoration, and she seemed to allow herself to be admired. And Mary stopped, following the couple with her gaze. A couple of times Robert hugged the young woman around the waist, pulled her close to whisper something in her ear, and even kissed her once, passionately and quickly, because she playfully pushed him away almost immediately. There were no doubts left. And this was despite the fact that Eleanor had said her husband was on another business trip. But the train that arrived at the station was a direct route from Sochi. Apparently Robert and the beauty had gone not on a business trip, but to a resort to relax. Mary even stamped her foot in annoyance. After all, the doctors had advised Eleanor to breathe the sea air, but Robert had said he had no time, but taking a holiday with his mistress, that was fine. Mary thought for a long time whether she should tell Eleanor. On the one hand, her husband was deceiving her, and Mary herself would prefer to know such a thing, even if the truth was bitter. But Eleanor, her heart was weak. Doctors recommended avoiding stress. Wouldn't the news be too much? In short, Mary decided not to upset Eleanor, but instead to talk to Robert frankly. For the sake of this important conversation, the woman went to his work. Robert's office was located in the city center. Robert was surprised to see his wife's sister at the door of his office. "Has something happened?" he asked. "Something has happened," Mary replied grimly, and without an invitation sat down opposite Robert, pulling the chair up to the table. And the woman told Robert what she had seen at the station, in detail, omitting nothing. Robert listened calmly, didn't even raise an eyebrow. And then? "Well, yes, I have a woman. We have real feelings for each other. We have to meet, well, secretly. I'm not thrilled about it myself. But why? Why?" "Well, sometimes it happens. Feelings cool. I thought Eleanor was the one, the only one. I was mistaken. Carol, with her, everything is different, completely. I would have told my wife long ago, but you know yourself, her heart is weak. Right now, Eleanor's condition is unstable. The doctors say it's another crisis. When it passes, I'll confess everything. We'll get divorced. I'll help her get settled. Don't worry. But telling her about Carol now is the same as sending her to the next world. You understand, don't you? Don't." Mary thought. Of course Robert was right. 100%. He was, of course, a scoundrel and a traitor, starting an affair with this Carol while married, but for the sake of his child's mother, in his own way, of course. But still, he was protecting his wife from the strongest stress, which could have a detrimental effect on her condition. In short, he and Robert agreed to keep quiet for now. It really was better for everyone involved in the story that way. For everyone, that is, except Carol herself, though she only vaguely believed this. One fine moment. Mary still remembered that late evening, almost night, in detail. David was asleep. He had school early. Mary was also about to go to bed, but couldn't tear herself away from her favorite TV series. And then the phone rang. Anxiety squeezed her heart. She felt something was wrong. It was too late for a casual chat. "How are you related to Eleanor Smith?" a strange male voice said on the phone. "Her sister," Mary replied, chilling with horror. She still hoped it wasn't that bad. "You need to come and pick up the child. Her husband is on a business trip and the daughter is too young to be left alone." "What about Eleanor?" "You need to come," the voice repeated, "and as soon as possible." Of course, Mary called a taxi and was at her sister's apartment about 15 minutes later. There were too many people there, doctors, police. They spoke with Mary, told her everything. She literally slid down the wall to the floor, sat right down on the cold laminate, covered her face with her hands. Eleanor had an attack. She died instantly. The doctors didn't make it. Little, bewildered Sarah came up to Mary. Fear and incomprehension were visible in the girl's eyes. Looking at her, Mary understood. She had to pull herself together. She was needed by her niece. "Will you take the child?" a man in uniform asked. "Of course," Mary nodded. "Of course I'll take her." And Sarah really spent almost a month with Mary. Robert was sorting things out at work, after all. He now had to look after his daughter. What business trips could there be now? He was looking for a nanny. All this time Sarah lived with Mary. David helped his mother look after the little one with great pleasure. And then Sarah was picked up by her father, who, with his characteristic seriousness, promised to visit her. "Can I come and visit her?" Mary asked. "You should. I made you keys to the apartment. Come whenever you want. Sarah is so drawn to you. Okay, can I ask something?" "I think I even know what about," Robert nodded. "You want to know if I told Eleanor? Well, about Carol? You're suggesting the attack happened because of that?" "Yes. Of course I didn't tell her anything." Robert looked at Sarah with a direct, sincere gaze. "I would never, under any circumstances, have done that. We talked about it, remember? I knew such truth was dangerous for Eleanor." Mary believed him. And then, several months after the tragedy, Mary found something among her sister's things. Sarah was truly happy that day. She didn't leave her aunt's side for a step. When Eleanor was visiting them, niece and aunt decided to play dress-up. It was fun. The 4-year-old little girl loved dressing up and transforming, and Mary, to be honest, too. They both enjoyed the game, put on music. Mary opened her sister's closet. Her heart tightened as usual at the sight of Eleanor's things, which she would never need. They had chosen this blouse together, and Eleanor was wearing this skirt when they went to the cinema for the last time, not knowing then, of course, that it was the last time. Mary sighed and tried to reach a hat from the top shelf. The hat caught. She reached out her hand, and a pile of things tumbled down, right onto Mary. These were hats, scarves, and several photographs tied with a ribbon. Mary bent down to pick up the pictures and was stunned. The photographs showed Robert and Carol hugging and kissing. One picture looked especially romantic. Robert and Carol against the backdrop of a stunning sea sunset, tanned, clearly in love. So that was it. Eleanor found out after all. Perhaps that's exactly why the attack happened. Mary turned over one of the pictures. There was an inscription, apparently made with a lip pencil. "Let him go. He doesn't love you anymore. He's only with you because of your daughter. He won't leave because you're sick, so take the first step." Horrible text, hurtful words. Mary imagined what it must have been like for her sister to suddenly receive this message and the note on the back of the picture. She called Robert. He behaved very strangely. "Why are you doing this? I've already lost my wife. I haven't gotten over the grief yet. You're also setting Carol up. Why do you need this? I understand you're upset that Eleanor is gone. Perhaps that's why you don't want me to be happy either. Is that why you staged this charade?" "What are you talking about? Where would I get these photos from? You don't understand anything at all. Your woman deliberately sent Eleanor to the next world. She's a terrible person. She did this." But Robert stuck to his line, and Mary understood. Carol, this attractive, slender woman, had enormous influence over him. That's why he believed her. Cunning, cold, and deceitful. Mary had no doubt. Carol had latched onto Robert only because of his apartment, his position, his decent income. She had a goal, and she achieved it. She destroyed her main rival. Maybe she didn't want her death, but the tragedy certainly worked in her favor. Before, they didn't talk much, and now even less so. Mary saw Sarah often. She usually picked the girl up for the weekend. Robert still worked a lot. It seemed that now nothing stood in the way of the widower and his mistress's personal happiness. But for some reason, the man wasn't in a hurry to bring Carol home. They met on neutral ground, they lived together on vacation, but in ordinary life they lived separately, and only about 3 years after the tragedy did Robert propose to his mistress and bring her home to his daughter. Sarah was already in the 1st grade then. Well, and since Carol became Robert's legal wife, Mary was gradually discouraged from visiting the house. Mary, incidentally, had already moved to another city by that time, bought a larger apartment there, found a good job. She even thought of taking Sarah for good because, well, why would Robert need her in his new family? She wanted to get guardianship over her niece. That's why she improved her living conditions, so there would definitely be no obstacles. But unexpectedly, Robert announced that he would raise his daughter himself. It was strange. He had never shown any particular love or affection for the girl, and he didn't look after her either. He just hired a nanny after his wife was gone. They gradually minimized our communication. Mary looked at her already grown-up niece. It wasn't difficult, considering I lived in another city. Carol, she tried in every way to shield you from me, because she understood perfectly. I know everything. I know what she did to Eleanor. And probably, she was afraid that I would tell you everything, that I would somehow prove I was right to Robert, and he would kick her out. In short, it's understandable that it was unpleasant for her to have someone like me nearby, who knew all her secrets. So they pushed me away. But I tried. I tried to see you. After all, they are parents, legal guardians. and I essentially have no rights to communicate with you. And I thought Carol appeared later, well, after Mom was gone. Maybe they delayed the wedding so that you would think that later, when you grew up. No. Carol was in your father's life before the tragedy, and most likely, she was the reason for what happened to your mother. I was scared to leave you with such a person, but what could I do? And I watched over you from afar, from the outside. Everything looked fine. You wouldn't even think you had such a hard life there. What a person she is. She didn't even spare a child. I won't go back to them. Of course you won't go back. You're almost 18 now. You can decide where to live yourself. Tomorrow we'll go to the university together, find out what's needed for admission. Did you bring your documents? Yes, I didn't manage to pack many things. That's nonsense. We'll buy everything tomorrow. The main thing is the documents. Carol stood by the coffee machine, waiting for the massive machine to make hot chocolate. She wanted to sleep incredibly. Again, little Lily suffered all night. Sometimes it was hard to breathe. Sometimes her chest hurt. The illness of her granddaughter, Carol's most precious treasure, was progressing. The girl couldn't play with friends, couldn't go to kindergarten. Her daughter Emily. She was clearly not ready for the difficulties of a sick child. She would get hysterical, throw tantrums, get angry at her daughter, who wasn't at fault for anything. It was Emily and her hapless boyfriend who made the child in a drunken stupor. And later, during the pregnancy, the future young mother didn't particularly restrict herself. She smoked and indulged in beer. Carol tried to keep an eye on her daughter, but it was impossible to watch over an adult person around the clock. People were right. They really had spoiled Emily. And yet Carol just wanted her daughter to be happy. Numerous lessons, gifts, surprises, birthdays. Carol invested all available resources in the child. Emily had no household chores because her mother believed the girl would have plenty of time to work in her life. Robert. He didn't particularly interfere in the upbringing of his younger daughter. He completely trusted his wife with this matter. And generally, he was never home. He was earning money to support the family. Carol was sure, you can't spoil someone with love. Childish whims would pass with age, and her daughter would grow into a strong, self-respecting person. Only Emily, at one fine moment, stopped studying because she was used to doing only what she wanted. She dropped out of school in the 10th grade, declared that she would never go to university, not even a commercial one, where almost everyone gets in, you just have to pay, because she was tired of studying and wanted to enjoy life to the fullest. She got involved with bad company, often started coming home drunk in the early morning. Carol could do nothing with her out-of-control daughter. Neither could Robert. He didn't know how to behave with Emily at all. He had never really been involved in her upbringing, though he loved her very much. He transferred money, gave gifts. And then something terrible happened. Robert was in a car accident on the highway when he was driving home from another business trip, and Carol was left alone. True, she was quick, and Robert's apartment and accounts went only to her and Emily. Processing the property cost a lot of money and effort, but now it had paid off. Sarah, meanwhile, she had long lived in another city, far away, a severed branch. Carol wasn't interested in her fate either. Neither was Robert. They only knew that Sarah had gotten into medical school, as she had dreamed. No other information. Sarah didn't maintain relations with her parents. Probably she communicated with her Aunt Mary. Well, that's good. Carol was perfectly fine with that. The main thing was the apartment, and money went only to them. And then Emily got pregnant by one of her perpetually drunk admirers, and Lily was born, weak, pale. Already in the maternity hospital, a serious heart defect was discovered, one with which people live at best until 7 or 8 years old without surgery. And Lily was already 5. Of course, Carol threw all her efforts into her granddaughter's rehabilitation and treatment. She herself was surprised by the strength of her feelings for the little one. She had once dreamed that Robert's money would provide them with a happy life without hardship. But it turned out differently. Everything went into Lily's rather expensive supportive treatment. The girl underwent several surgeries. This only slightly improved the situation, but didn't fundamentally solve the problem. It was scary to think what could happen to her granddaughter. Even Emily, usually carefree and thinking only of herself, even she, it seemed, understood that the jokes were over and tried to look after her daughter as much as possible. But the main part of the worries still lay on Carol's shoulders. In the city, everyone refused further treatment for Lily. There were no such facilities or specialists here. So Carol, Emily, and Lily went to Moscow. They were advised to go to a children's surgery center, where it seemed almost like wizards worked, helping in the most difficult cases. It was hard to get an appointment. The queue was huge, but Carol managed to get through. True, at the appointment they were taken aback. The queue was huge because people were coming from all over the country, and most situations were like Lily's, not tolerating delay. No one could be moved up, and by that time the girl's condition might worsen so much that no one would take her to the operating table anymore. They prescribed the little one medication therapy, but no one could say if it would help or not. Carol drank hot chocolate, leaning her back against the light hospital wall. Nearby, a bewildered Emily sat on a couch. Lily slept on her lap, unaware of the seriousness of the situation. And Carol could barely hold back tears of helplessness and despair. She couldn't do anything more. And suddenly, "Oh, Smith, dear," one nurse said to another. Everyone had given up on him. His heart was full of holes, the doctors said, hopeless. And she performed the surgery at night in her free time. She didn't leave the table for 5 hours and saved the boy. He'll live now, and he'll become completely healthy. A miracle. "Smith is a pediatric cardiac surgeon from God," the other nurse nodded in agreement. "And a good person, too, if only there were more people like her." "Excuse me, where is Dr. Sarah Smith's office?" Carol rushed over to the nurses and asked them to show her to this doctor's office. She had almost no doubt. No, it seemed too fantastic, but still. Sarah was finishing another report when a woman from the past appeared at the door of her office, the one who had once brought so much pain, so many problems. Carol. And next to her, holding a sleeping child in her arms, stood Emily. Sarah recognized her sister too, although she had last seen her when she was still in elementary school. For some reason, she felt fear, and also dislike, contempt, disgust, but also surprise, of course. And why? Why had the past found her at that moment when everything in her life had settled down and improved? Carol began to speak. She cried, asked for forgiveness, and it seemed was sincerely remorseful for her behavior back then. "What happened? Perhaps it's a boomerang, a punishment for what I did to you. But this child, a child not guilty of anything. You are our last hope, Sarah. Take her for surgery, otherwise she won't live to see her turn. You do this sometimes, I know. You take on difficult children outside of work hours. I can't ask you this after everything, but I am asking. I have no one else to turn to." Sarah looked at the little girl in her sister's arms. Her niece, as it turned out. And with surprise, she suddenly realized that she no longer felt resentment, and the dislike for these two women had evaporated somewhere. Before Sarah were people. Unhappy, frightened people who needed help. And a child. A seriously ill child. Sarah asked for Lily's documents. She needed to understand what they were dealing with. Carol readily pulled a thick folder from her bag. Test results, reports, scans. Yes, indeed, the situation was complex and didn't tolerate delay. But Sarah understood that she could handle it. She had already dealt with such cases. True, she would, of course, have to sacrifice her free time again. But this was such a small price compared to a child's life that it wasn't worth talking about. Sarah had gone into medicine to save people after all. This was her calling, her dream. "Some tests will need to be redone," Sarah said. "And don't worry, everything will be all right."